more minutes.
I see somebody's coming.
Are they sticking out? Yeah. Couple. Yeah. Can I ask you to do me a really big favor? I should have gotten myself a glass of started so we can stay on time. Thank you so much for coming. While I was on my Camino, while I was on my fan club here, while I was on my Camino, a lot of people gave me some positive comments and support and prayed for me, and I really appreciated that. And one of the things that people said is, oh, when you get back, will you give us a summary or a presentation? And so here I am. That's what I'm doing today. So I hope you enjoy it. And I'm going to try not to be too formal. This is pretty relaxed here. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay, good. Hi. All right, so the Camino de Santiago, I had given myself 40, thank you, Sandy. I had given myself 40 days, and that's what I took to walk it. It was 500 miles or 800 kilometers and over 1 million steps. My little watch did count steps, and I hit a million before I was done, so I know I had a lot. I don't have a clicker, so I'll be signaling my my trusty friend there, Teresa, is going to be handling the technology. This is a map of all of the Camino routes in Spain. And when people talk about the Camino de Santiago, they're usually thinking about the Frances route, and that's the one I took, the 500-mile. But there are other routes, too, that people take, and they all end in Santiago, which is over on the left-hand side there of the northwest corner of Spain is where Santiago is. And the Camino Frances is the green line on top there, and it starts right over the French border in Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port, and that's where I started and then walked across to Santiago. But you can see the other lines. There's a blue line there that starts in Portugal and ends in Santiago. That's a fairly common one. There's the Primitivo, and I think that's the upper green line there, and that ends up in Santiago. But anyway, just so you know, there's a lot of choices of routes, but the Frances is the one that most people know about and the one that most people walk. The Camino has been a pilgrimage for people for over 1,000 years. And every year, I think more and more people walk it. I think my sister walked the end of it with me. Was it like 400,000 or 300,000?
So, they were anticipating about 420,000 pilgrims arriving in Santiago during 2022.
Yeah, so that's a lot. And not all of them are starting at the same place or whatever, but yeah, and not all of them finish in Santiago either because they drop out or they only have a week, so they do a chunk of it. And some people do that. Especially if they live in Europe, they'll do one section of it on a week's vacation every year. So there's a lot of different ways to walk. So the Camino Frances, like I mentioned, starts over on the right side there, Saint-Jean, which is in France. And then those are all the little towns that I walked through on my way to Santiago. And my sister Raylene met me in Sarria, which is right over there. And we walked the last 100 kilometers, or about 75 miles, together to the end. The Compostela is your certificate of completion that you get at the end, and there are 2 ways to earn that Compostela. The first one is to do the walk and get at least 1 stamp a day in the passport, and I'll show you that in a minute. Or if you start in Sarria, like my sister did, and walk the last 100 kilometers and get 2 stamps a day, and then when you check in Santiago in the pilgrim office, they will ask you for your passport. They will ask to see it. They don't really look that carefully, I don't think, but you want to have a lot of stamps on it to show that you were at these places along the way. And they also will ask you your reason for walking, religious or other. And then if you satisfy all of their requirements, then you get a Compostela like that. And that's my name. You can't see it really well, but that's the Latin, I think, version, or the Spanish version of my name. Yeah. So we were just talking about the movie, The Way, and this is how a lot of people learn about the Camino. This is a movie that came out, I think, at around 2011 or somewhere in there, and it stars Martin Sheen and was directed, and also his real-life son, Emilio Estevez, is in it. And it's a fairly, it is Hollywoodized, of course, to add to the story, but it really does give you a nice overview of the Camino. You get to see the scenery and, get kind of a flavor for some of the things that happen with the people that you meet along the way. And this is often, people hear about the Camino in many ways, but almost everybody who goes at one time or another watches the movie before they go. So the Camino de Santiago is translated as the Way of St. James. And last week in church here, Pastor Liz Davis, our gospel reading was about when Jesus came to James and his brother John, sons of Zebedee. They were fishing, and he recruited them to be apostles or disciples and to follow him and to spread the good news. And the Way of St. James kind of tells us, we're not sure how much of it is true versus how much is legend, but it tells us what happened to James when he went out and tried to spread the good news. And the story is basically that James traveled to the Spain region, which was at the time primarily Muslim. And so he was trying to preach Christianity there. Apparently it didn't go real well, and so he went back to Jerusalem, where he was beheaded by King Herod at the time. And then his friends or whomever then took his body back to Spain and buried it there. And the story goes that somebody found that grave. Somehow it was marked, so they supposedly knew that it was James that was buried there. And they referred to it as St. James under a field of stars when they moved his remains. And they are now interred in the cathedral in Santiago. And James is definitely a big deal in Spain. He is the patron saint of Spain. They celebrate St. James Day on July 25th every year, and on holy years, they do some special things at the cathedral. But anyway, that is the rest of the story of St. James, however true it may or may not be. So I just want to talk a little bit about a spiritual pilgrimage. this is what I felt like I wanted to do, was a pilgrimage. And this is from something I read online. It was a Reverend Gibbs, and he leads groups of college students on pilgrimage. But this is how he described it, and it really resonated with me. It's a journey to a holy place. It's intended to be a difficult journey, and it was. It's intended to be life-transforming, and, as my life lives out, we'll see how transforming it is. And it's certainly a disconnect from your life here in the United States and your routine of jobs and family and things that keep us busy here. So my goals as I planned this, and I've been planning to do this for at least 5 years, since I heard about it and I watched the movie The Way, and then I needed to retire, and then I retired, and then there was COVID. So finally, this past year, I was able to do it. But my goals were to spend time in daily prayer. And so I had made a list of all the groups of people from my life that I wanted to pray for every day and spend time with that. Most people that know me know that I am a control person. I'm not going to say freak, but I like to be in control. And so I really wanted to work on letting go of my need to be in control. I wanted to accept whatever God was going to present to me along the way and be open to new experiences and not have preconceived notions and just accept what came. I wanted to conquer any fears I might have of solo travel. I wasn't particularly fearful. You probably figured out by now I did this trip by myself, although you're never alone on the Camino. But I was going to a country I didn't know the language. I thought I was going to learn the language. I downloaded Babbel. I didn't learn the language. But anyway, so, just to kind of conquer any fears I might have. And I wasn't, a lot of people said, "Aren't you scared?" And I really wasn't scared. I was a little anxious, but I wasn't scared. So anyway, and I also, what appeals to me is to challenge my body and mind and, to throw in a little misery in there too. And that goes back to my running days. I learned how to be miserable and to survive. My running partners are here, so they know what I mean. One of the iconic stops on the Camino Frances, and you will see this in the movie The Way, if you have ever watched that movie, is this is called the Hill of Forgiveness, and it's right outside Pamplona. And I remember that's what it was called, but I don't really remember too much who built it or why or when, to be honest. But anyway, everybody stops here. It's kind of a big deal. But I wanted, this was another quote that I had read, is just the difference between a sightseeing trip and a pilgrimage is that tourists plan and expect, and pilgrims discover and accept. And again, that really sums up kind of the spirit of the Camino, that it's all about gratitude and being open to whatever comes your way. In Spain, pilgrims are called peregrinos, is the Spanish word. There's the passport, and you get this when you start, and then every time you stop, almost every bar or cafe or the places we stayed, or churches, or even little roadside fruit stands or whatever, would have their own distinctive stamp. And so you would always pull out your passport to get a stamp, because if you're walking the whole way, you need to get at least one a day. And then they also date it. And supposedly this is so that, whoever checks, but they don't check that closely, that you have at least one stamp a day. I started out, I think like a lot of people, every place I went, oh, stamp, stamp, stamp. Well, then pretty soon I'm running out of space and I'm only a week in, so then I was a little more discerning. But some of the stamps are just really cool. Every one of them is different, and sometimes it tells you where the stamp was from, so you can go back and remember the places too. Oh, also, when you check into an albergue or a hostel, which I'll tell you more about, they will always ask for this, partly so they can remember to stamp it for you, but also the hostels are set up only for people walking the pilgrimage. So they are checking. Okay, so I am a member of the American Pilgrims on Camino. Is that it? American Pilgrims on Camino, the Minnesota chapter. And if you have any interest in walking the Camino, this is a nice group to join. And once a year, they have a shell ceremony. This is my shell. And my sister Raylene and I went down there, and the woman in the middle in the red is my first childhood friend. Her name is Anne. And Anne walked the Camino about 5 years ago. And so it was fun to reconnect with her. She lives in the Twin Cities. Anyway, so Anne and I reconnected before I left, and she presented Raylene and I with our shells at the ceremony. And I've cut off the photo there, but on the right there were, I think there were 15 people who got shells or so, and there was a whole ceremony. The woman with the blue hair, she was the pastor at that particular church, and she had done the Camino and had a heart for it. And so it was a whole nice little ceremony and a potluck. And the shell you see everywhere on the Camino, and the scallop shell is native to Spain, and you used to get this at the end of the Camino somewhere as kind of a souvenir of completion. But now everybody carries a shell when they're walking, and they usually attach it to their backpack, so you can easily identify who the pilgrims are that are walking. Some people say that the scallop shell is a metaphor for the routes, all the different routes that end up in Santiago. But it's special for pilgrims, the shell is. This was my gear, and I worked a lot on my packing list. I read oodles of people's packing lists. I put things in the pile, I took things out of the pile. I put things in, I took them out. Am I going to take this? Am I going to take that? I was really concerned about the weight of my pack, as everybody is. The recommendation was not to carry more than 10% of your body weight. Lucky me, I'm not thin. So it was too heavy, I could just gain some more weight, I guess. But anyway, my pack ended up weighing about 16 to 17 pounds before I added my snacks and liquids to it. And this is my pack. It was a 40-liter, and it was plenty of room. I was over there in Europe for 2 months, and everything I needed fit right in here. It was plenty. It was comfortable, and that was really the most important thing, that it be comfortable. I also took hiking poles. I put them in my pack. I took them on the plane. I don't know, I guess you're not supposed to do it. Nobody said anything. But anyway, so it was not a problem. The other thing is there's a sense to what they sense to want to pack your fears. Oh, I might need this, I might need that. So people throw things in, and little things that don't weigh anything, 10 of them suddenly weigh a pound, as we found out. So you have to be really careful what you take, and you can buy things over there. So it's really not a problem. This is about, this is kind of an overview of what I took. I had 4 tops, 3 short sleeve and a long sleeve. I had a long pair of pants and 2 capris. I had underwear, 2 pairs of shoes, my Hoka trail runners that I wore completely out, but they were very comfortable. And then a pair of sandals to put on in the evening, a rain poncho, a lightweight jacket. It was cold in the mornings. When I started out, it was usually 45 or 50. So I like to wear the buff and the gloves, and then the sun hat during the day. I had a lightweight sleeping bag. The albergues were not cold. I was there in September and October, but you needed something. then I had the rest of the stuff. The Dr. Bronner's 10-in-1 bar, I don't know if you've ever seen this or used it, but you can get it at the co-op. I think you might be able to get it at Target or something. It comes in, it's a bar like this. But anyway, they advertise that you can wash your hair and your body and your dishes and your car, and apparently you can do anything with it. But I took that, it worked. So anything that I thought that I could live without, like hair conditioner or whatever, I left at home. I had a journal, a little journal that I kept. This was my guidebook. I had, I don't think they call them fanny packs, but you know, those packs in front, and that's where I kept like my journal and this and my sunglasses and I did take a phone with me. And then my hydration system, I used like a bottle with a screw top that had the hose, and then so I could put that in my pack and have the hose to drink out of, and that was really easy to stop and refill along the way, so that worked out well. So my training, you know, there's a lot of conversation about how to train, and some people say, well, you know, the Camino will train you. Well, I wasn't going to leave it to that chance. So I tried to do a lot of hills because I was told, and it is true, there's a lot of hills on the Camino. And so two of my favorites were to walk from West Duluth Grand Avenue up Haynes Road up to, I didn't go as far as the mall, but you know, I would go 3-4 miles up and back. And then the other one I like to do is from my house in West Duluth up to Proctor and back. And that was about 8-9 miles, depending on what route I took. And I tried to do that at least once a week, and then multiple shorter walks with my loaded pack and poles, so that any problems I was having, anything that was rubbing or blistering, I could work out ahead of time. And then I did some other exercises. About 6 weeks before I left, I did see a physical therapist, and she set me up with some knee and hip and leg strengthening things, and I think that really helped my endurance as well. So, how did I get started? So I flew into Paris, and I spent 4 days there being a tourist, seeing the sights and having a really good time. And I'm not going to talk about that today. But anyway, so then to get to St. Jean, the starting point, I took a high-speed train, and Europe has really got their mass transit system down. They put us to shame on that. So the train went 175 miles an hour because it had an odometer or speedometer thing that showed in my car. So zip, and it was smooth. I could have, you know, had a cup of coffee on my lap and it wouldn't have spilled. So anyways, about 5 hours from Paris to Saint-Jean-Pied-Port. And I stayed overnight there. And then, but before I stayed overnight, I stopped at the Pilgrim office, that's on the left, and that's where I checked in then and got my Compostela, and they give you my passport, and they give you some information on, they give you a whole list on places that you can stay in each town. They give you a little information on Camino etiquette, things like that. And they take your real travel passports, so they have that record. They don't keep it, but you know, they have that record of who's on the Camino. Okay, in my journal for Monday, September 9th, I wrote down, "Today I walk." And I started out from Saint-Jean that morning. Saint-Jean is a lovely little village in France, on the western border of France. And the first walk, some people do it in 1 day. I was thankfully advised to break it into 2 days. You walk over the Pyrenees Mountains, which are right on the border of France and Spain. And I had made reservations for an albergue or a hostel 6 miles from Saint-Jean. And I thought, this is just going to be an easy walk, 6 miles. I've been walking more than this. Next slide. It was not an easy walk. It was hot, and there was no shade. The hills put the Duluth Hills to shame. It was so steep. And anyway, it was really hard. When I got to the albergue on the right, 6 miles in, I was never so grateful to see a place in my life. So that's where I stayed the first night, and, just thanked my friend Anne, for advising me to cut that walk over the Pyrenees into 2 days. And this is another saying, and it's absolutely true. The Camino is the hardest and also the easiest thing that you will ever do. So that first night in the albergue in Orison, I'm still in France here, on the left you can see, I think they have like 40 or 50 beds there, and they're booked up every night. And so they have a communal dinner that they offer there, and everybody pretty much takes part in that. So you sit down at the table and you get your food, and then as part of that dinner, they go around and ask everybody to stand up and tell us what's your name, where you're from, and why are you walking the Camino. And so that's why you hear a lot of every reason you can think of, that people are walking to maybe heal from a hurt in their life. One woman was walking to end abortion. Somebody else was walking because they still could. So there was all sorts of reasons that people gave. But this is also where you meet what they call your Camino family, because you will see those same people over and over and over again. Some of them you may never see again, but many you do. And so that was just really fun to make those early connections. I happened to sit down at a table with a couple of women who just happened to be from the United States, and 3 of them were from Minnesota. And so down on the right there, the woman I'm standing with, she is from the Rochester area of Minnesota. And the Minnesota girls, they just got to be really good friends throughout the Camino. A lot of people ask about what kind of surface I walked on. And so I've just got some pictures here showing it. The surfaces were flat and they were hilly. They were treacherous, like you can see on the right. And it never failed to be the end of the day where you'd be going downhill and you'd be tired, and the rocks would be loose, and you'd just have to kind of pick your way. You'd think, I got 2 miles to go, and it might take you an hour and a half to pick down those rocks because you didn't want to fall. And people unfortunately did fall, and they broke things, and or sprained ankles and such. So really tried not to be doing that. We walked among farm animals. There really wasn't any wildlife to see, but there was farm animals. There was pigs and cows and horses and sheep. And so you can see I'm still walking through the Pyrenees here, and you can see that this is a blacktop area there. There were tunnels made from trees, and there were tunnels made from stone. And so a lot of the tunnels had graffiti inside. Some of it was artistic, kind of honoring pilgrims. Others was nonsense, as far as I could tell. But anyway, walked into picturesque villages like this. The church would always be on the highest. Every village had a church, no matter how big or small they were. And the churches were always at the highest point of the town. On the left there, I like to call that picture, the road to the cross is not always easy. And this was a long way up to the top of that hill, and it was loose gravel and kind of this, stone that went like this, that you just had to kind of pick your way around, and it was steep, and that was just kind of a challenge walking up there. Also, walked through little villages. It was either in the morning or it was siesta time. But as you can see, there isn't a soul in sight. No cars, no people. The towns were very clean. I always felt very, very safe walking through these, even if I was all by myself and there was nobody else. But during siesta time, they definitely do go indoors and shut everything down. Usually starts about 3 o'clock and ended about 6 or 7 p.m. And you definitely wanted to get something to eat before then. Sometimes a bar or cafe would be open, But the grocery stores definitely closed, the restaurants closed during that time. But they were lovely little villages. Sometimes I walked next to roads where cars were going along, and sometimes I walked next to trees wearing Afghans. Isn't that interesting? Walked across rivers. That's right, me walking across a stone river on the left there. And because we were there in the fall, there was much less water, but I imagine the spring, there'd be quite a bit of water. And on the right, I am picking my way down a very smooth, wet, slippery rock that had come down quite a ways to get to that point. The Meseta. So people talk about the Camino, the Camino Frances, the 500 miles. They kind of talk about it the first third, which they say challenges your body. The second third, or the Meseta, which challenges your mind. And the final third, which challenges your spirit and your heart. The Meseta, that middle section, is flat. It's brown. Of course, everything had been harvested by this time, so it was, this is late September. So it was flat, it was desolate, it was a long way between towns, sometimes as many as 6 miles between services or more. Wasn't a lot of pretty scenery to see, just walk, gravel roads. The Meseta was the site of probably my hardest day on the Camino. The Meseta starts coming out of Burgos. Keep that in mind, Katie. And so coming out of Burgos, I had intended to walk 20 kilometers that day, which is 12 miles. But as I was walking, I was hearing that the town I was headed for, which was it Hortillas? Doesn't matter. That the town was kind of a bottleneck coming out of the big city of Burgos, where everybody was staying, and they were saying, there's no place to stay there. So I checked on Booking.com. There really wasn't anything listed there. Things were full up, so I thought, well, I'll just keep walking if I have to. So anyway, I got to that town, and I had something to eat or drink. It was about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Yes, indeed, everything was booked. So I knew that there was going to be a hostel or an albergue at about 3 miles. So I thought I can do this, and it was hot. As you can see, there isn't a cloud in the sky. And I had plenty of water, but I just started to feel icky and like short of breath, and I'd walk up a little incline, and I'd be short of breath, I'd have to stop, and I thought, this isn't good. And then along the way, there were these piles of rocks with crosses on the top. And of course, you can't help thinking, sure, this is where people die, right here. But anyway, so I get to that albergue, and I'm just walking down the little road, and a car comes at me, and the guy stops, rolls down the window, and I can tell he's got a pilgrim sitting next to him, and he said, if you're going to that albergue, it's full. And I knew that I still had to go 3 more miles to get to the next. So anyway, he offered a ride in the car, and I jumped in, and yeah, he took me to the next town. But oh my gosh, that was a tough day. Your head kind of plays tricks with you, that's for sure. Daily distances, I averaged 12 to 15 miles a day to kind of keep myself on track, because I knew I was meeting my sister on October 21st in a certain spot. So I knew I had to be there, and I just wanted to keep going. My shortest day that I walked was 6 miles, and my longest day was 19. And I did take 2 rest days in there, where I just stayed in the town and was a tourist. Okay, the albergues. Lots of people have questions about the albergues. This is what they call their hostel system for pilgrims over there. So there are a number of levels of accommodation. Albergues are kind of at the bottom. They're the least expensive. It's where most pilgrims stay. It's where most of the beds are. Then they actually have something called a hostel, which is a little bit above. And some of the hostels then will have some single private rooms. And then you can, they have something called a pension or a pension. People pronounce it different ways, which is a little more expensive, and then you might get a private bathroom and a little more amenities, and then they have hotels and they have luxury hotels. So the only luxury hotel I stayed in was in Pamplona, because when we happened to get there, there was some huge festival in town, and there wasn't a single place to stay except an expensive hotel. So that was the only luxury hotel I stayed in. And that was only about 5 days in to the walk. Anyway, albergues are either private or they are municipal. I stayed at mostly private ones owned by somebody. And then the municipal are owned by the town or the municipality. They're staffed by volunteers. Anywhere from 5 beds to a room to over 100. They're usually bunk beds, although sometimes there might be a single bed. There might be 2 bunks in a room. There might be 25 or more bunks in a room. Several of the albergues, I didn't stay in any of them, but I know there are some that had no electricity, but most of them did. You could plug in your phone, that kind of thing. They had hot showers. They may have been co-ed showers, but there were hot showers. I'll talk more about that later. They're all different, and just whatever you ended up with, you were just grateful to be there at that time. As you can see on the bottom, that they give you a paper sheet frequently, which is disposable. It's a vinyl covered mattress, and then you put a paper sheet over it. And all the places had pillows, also a vinyl covered pillow. So then there was a paper pillowcase too. Some places, however, it was a real treat to get cloth sheets that they laundered, and a lot of the places they had blankets. I don't see any on those particular beds, but they had blankets, and some of them had like those cupboards where you could put your pack in there, and then they might have a lock or they might not. All of the that's okay, you can leave it here, Teresa. All the albergue rooms that I stayed in, except for the one in the monastery, run by Catholic monks, okay? All the other ones were co-ed, but that one, nope, there was gonna be no men and women in the same room. So it didn't matter if you were married or whatever, women here, men there. But otherwise, almost all of them were co-ed. This was a place where I splurged on a private room. It was a monastery, not the one I was just talking to, but this was a closed monastery, and I think this was probably a nun's room. It was a teeny little room with that bed, a table where I have my pack flopped on there, and then there was a private bathroom. And so when you check in, they'll sometimes ask you if you want a private room, and I always asked how much they were. And this one happened to be 25 euros, which is about $25. And I thought that was a bargain, so I stayed there. Okay, you can go. So this was one of the municipal albergues I stayed at. And I had a preconceived idea that they would be shabby and more run down because they weren't privately owned. This one was immaculate. In fact, it looked like it maybe had been rehabbed during the COVID shutdown, maybe. But it was $8 a night, and you always like to get there when it looks like this, because then you can pick which bed you want and hopefully get a lower bunk. Because upper bunks, when you are not young, are really hard to get up and down, especially in the middle of the night and it's dark. The other thing about albergues is that everybody puts their shoes in a separate spot. Shoes don't go in the sleeping or the eating areas. So that's why you bring along a pair of sandals or something to wear. I could have stayed in a teepee even. This was an albergue. I didn't stay there, but somebody I was walking with, she did stay there, but then I never saw her again, so I never got to hear how it was. But that was an albergue. Looked like it could have been in South Dakota, but there it was in Spain. And in the town right next to this, there was a cowboy bar too, which was kind of fun. And then on the right, that's my room that's a large city. I think I was in Leon there. And there were 2 bunks in the room. It was super cozy. It had a little balcony that you overlooked the street down below. In Spain, people like to go out in the streets at night. Families, kids are running around. They eat their dinners late. So they'll go out and eat maybe at 8, 9 o'clock at night. Kids are running around, kicking balls around, or playing tag in the big square or up and down the streets. And parents are having dinner, enjoying a drink, talking. So, sometimes it could be a little noisy outside, but. And then here's another place that I stayed where all the shoes were outside there. Didn't rain that night, so that was good. And then on the right was an albergue. That was a relatively new one that was lovely inside. They had, most of them do serve beer, and that was part of my routine too, to have a beer when I got there. This is Heidi's, and Raylene and I stayed here. This was just a really cute little albergue. There were 3 bunks and then 2 single beds, and that's Raylene making up her bed over there. You can see in the top right picture. And then the owners prepared a meal for us, and so there were 5 of us that were staying there that night. And so we had France and Taiwan and America were the countries that were represented at the table there. And that was really the most fun, was when there were communal meals that you could meet people. So what was a typical day like? Tried to get up and packed up, and really you don't want to be having to pack you kind of want to have your packing done and everything staged the night before, because not everybody gets up at the same time. You don't want to be disturbing people. But I really tried to get up and get going between 7 and 8. You're usually packing up in the dark. You're trying to be quiet. On the Camino, they talk about first breakfast and second breakfast. And that's because you need 2 breakfasts. First breakfast is, if they served a breakfast at the albergue, I always took that if it was available. Or I would try to stop at a cafe bar, a mile or 2 or down the road. And then a second breakfast between 10 and 11 o'clock. And some of the things that those breakfasts would consist of, always café con leche, which is coffee with milk, and the orange juice is fresh squeezed. They have machines where you see them pouring in the Valencia oranges, and then it comes out fresh squeezed, and it's the best orange juice I've ever had. And then on the right there, that pie-shaped thing, that's a Spanish tortilla, which is an egg and potato bake. You always got bread with everything, bread. That's a pastry on the left. I ate a lot of chocolate-filled croissants. Another thing I ate over there was toast with tomatoes and olive oil. That was good. But those kinds of things made up my first and second breakfasts. Lunch options, kind of depending on when I was going to stop, what towns I was going through. Sometimes I would pick up what they call a bocadillo, which would be a ham sandwich. It would be on this crusty bread with ham, sometimes cheese, no condiments. They were kind of dry. But they did travel well, and I never worried about them going bad. The ham was that real smoked, dry smoked kind of ham. And then I would always keep some apples and oranges in my pack. So I might grab something like that someplace, or, as I got further on, soup was available. That's what a bar cafe looks like. So you're walking along, and then all of a sudden you'll kind of round a corner and you'll see one of those. And if it's been, a couple hours since you've stopped, you want to stop, because that's the only place you can use the bathroom along the way. So you want to stop, buy something, because they're providing that bathroom and the toilet paper and the plumbing. And so I would buy a coffee or an orange juice, or maybe I would have my second breakfast there or a lunch, and then use the bathroom. But they were lovely, and that's where you would meet up with people you had maybe not seen in a couple days. You'd be walking by and hear your name and join somebody at the table, and how's your walk been? Where are you going tonight? That kind of thing. So other options, or just some observations on food, is they would have those little markets, and you could stop in there and buy some Powerade kind of stuff, or fruit, or some little snacky things. Sometimes you could find nuts. They were a little hard to find. Just things to kind of keep on hand so that you had something to eat. The salads were interesting. I know they have tons of vegetables in Spain because I saw them at the markets, but it was really hard to get them when you sat down to eat. For whatever reason, they didn't serve a lot of vegetables. But this was a particularly good salad, and their salads, of course, always are served with that Spanish bread, but they served them with canned tuna. I don't know why, but I saw it over and over again, canned tuna on their salads. The oranges were great there. The soup on a really cold, rainy day, that's a lentil soup. And then on the lower right there, I sat down and joined those two women from England, and then that young man, he's from the Netherlands. And again, I saw the young man after that. I never saw the ladies again. Then you would come upon a food truck, which was always a welcome sight because they were often unexpected. You know, here you thought maybe you had 5 or 6 miles to walk before there'd be some place to get something to eat or drink, and lo and behold, there'd be a food truck or a little stand like that on the right, you know, where they might serve, they would have a coffee machine. Everybody makes espresso over there, and fruit and, you know, maybe some pastries. On the left there is the Happiness Cafe, and that was run by a woman from the United States who walked the Camino, loved it so much, she went home, she told her husband, he said, "I've never seen you so happy, let's move to Spain." So they moved to Spain, they bought a house on the property, and then they run this. And this was her last day of operation for the season, so she was giving Raylene and I all kinds of stuff. We stopped there for a smoothie, and yeah. It was really fun to talk with her and some of the people who stopped there. There's wine vineyards that are growing, and so they were harvesting grapes, and so grapes were laying, you know, clumps of grapes. So, you know, we stopped and ate some of them. And they had some apple trees, and so if there were apples on the ground, we would pick those up to eat. At the places that we stayed for dinner, which was usually 7 to 8 p.m., here's a place we stayed, and the owner made us paella. And so that was a communal meal. I think there were about 12 of us around the table, and he made that paella for us, which is a rice kind of seafood dish that's very common in Spain. It was delicious. I stayed at an albergue run by Korean people, so on the left there, that was, I can't remember the name of it, of course, but it was some kind of Korean bowl with sauces, and that was good. And then you could always go out to eat, and so most of the towns of any size had restaurants, and so the women I'm sitting with there on the right are all women who were walking by themselves. They were all solo walkers, and we had met at various points along the way and decided to go for dinner. And so going around the table from the left, we have somebody from France, New York, England, the Netherlands, and then me. So it was fun. You can always get octopus. Raylene and I did try it. We weren't real thrilled about it, but we did get octopus pizza, and that was really pretty good, but I just could not get past the visual on that. Another option for dinner, if you were going out to eat, or sometimes this was served at the albergues, was a pilgrim's meal. And this was the most economical way to have dinner. There'd be a set price, usually $12 to $14, and it would be 3 courses. So you would choose something from the first course, which might be sliced meat, it might be a salad, it might be soup. The second course would be some kind of protein, chicken or pig cheeks. I got those one time. They were good. Might be a steak. It was a thin sliced steak or something like that. And then it would come with potato, which was always French fries. No baked potato, no boiled. It was always French fries. So that, those got sickening really quickly. And then there'd be a dessert, and you would have a choice of the dessert. And then it always came with wine and water. So it was really the most economical way to eat. The best part of the Camino is the people that you meet. And, these are some of the people that I shared meals with and conversation with and walked with. There on the upper right-hand side, those were ladies from Southeast Asia. There was one from Malaysia, and there was a lady from, I can't remember where she was from. And then the mother-daughter in the yellow and blue, I did run into them a couple of times, and they were so sweet. And they were from South Korea. There are a lot of South Koreans on the Camino. But anyway, it was just fun to run into people over and over and share that camaraderie of being on the Camino. So by the afternoon, after I had had my 2 breakfasts, I'd walked, got into an albergue. I liked to get there before 3, often it was 4 o'clock, and you would check in, you'd be assigned a bed, hopefully there was a lower bunk, otherwise be on the top bunk, make up the bed, and then take a shower, wash clothes, nap, maybe walk around the town, spend some time journaling, talk to people. The showers, so in co-ed showers, there might be 4 stalls. So they were all private. And then outside of the stalls, there might be this much space to change into your dry clothes. So it was definitely tight and difficult to change into your dry clothes, where to hang them. There wasn't places to hang them. But anyway, the showers were hot. They saved water by you press a button and the water came out for about 7 seconds, and then you have to press the button again. Yeah, but they definitely save water over there. It's very important to them. The clothes, if a place had offered a laundry in a washing machine for like $4, I took advantage of it, because then they would wring out better and they would dry, because I'm hanging them out like at 5 o'clock at night, and so you just hoped they dry. If I had to wash them in an outdoor laundry tub, which all the places had, with my Dr. Bronner soap, then sometimes in the morning I'd be hanging my socks off the back of my pack to dry, because they weren't quite dry. Always had at least 1 beer a day. This was something called Rodler, which I had never heard of. It was kind of a combination of lemonade and beer in a bottle, and it was sweet and refreshing and lemony, and then, like I said, I might explore the village. Down there, that was a building in a larger town by a well-known Spanish architect down there. How did I know where to go? So I had my book here. And my book, was broken up into manageable stages. If I wanted to go from here to here in a day, it would tell me how far it was. It would kind of talk about the towns where I might stay and eat. But when you're on the trail, you want to be watching for arrows and shells. Those are what keep you on track, and so you know where to go. And on the left there, those in one region of Spain, they had those cement things with the shell and the arrow. Sometimes the arrow would be painted in some obscure little place, kind of worn away. There the arrow was made out of rocks because it wasn't clear which way to turn. Or along the street there, you can see that in Logroño, which is a city, they have their own style of shell, and then they would have those arrows, and it would be built into the pavement. So that helped you know that, especially going through cities was really challenging, because there was a lot of things to vie for your attention, and sometimes it was easy to miss an arrow. There's just a couple more. The one on the left there is counting down to Santiago. So when I saw that one, I still had 522 kilometers to go. And then sometimes you'd see one that was, just kind of out in the middle of nowhere. People had set a stone there. Maybe it was a remembrance or a prayer that they had for somebody. And like I mentioned, everybody all the regions had their own style of shell, and you would see these in pavements, in blacktop, along the way, so you always watch for those too. And yes, I did get lost. And one time I was walking with one of my Minnesota friends, and we had decided to take the scenic river route, and we're yakking, and then the next thing you know, where are we? And we knew that we were supposed to join up with the other route, and do you remember seeing it? She didn't remember seeing it. We're asking people, they don't speak English. One person says go this way, one person says go that way. And so we asked this woman who was heading toward her car, and she was a teacher. We could see she had come out of a school, and she spoke some English. And she said, well, I have to go pick up my son at daycare, but get in the car, I'll drive you back to get you on track. And so she did. We went and picked up her son and put him in the car seat, and then she drove us and dropped us off so we could get back on track. But that's the kind of thing that the Camino magic and the Camino angels that you see. People want to be helpful. When you're in town, and like I said, it's really easy to miss in that center picture there, that arrow, and you get off track. You can see there's an arrow pointed on the side of some rocks there. I walked through little villages, and I walked through cities. Leon is a large city, Leon, and I thought it was a beautiful city. It was very clean. People were very friendly, and it was fun to re-find my fellow pilgrims when I got to Leon. The little towns and villages were very medieval. Things were built, in the 12th to the 16th centuries. There were a lot of bridges like you saw there. There was cows that walked down the street, and that was just part of that mountain town there. I love to leave the cities in the morning. It was hard to leave in the dark if I was going in a rural area because I didn't bring a headlamp and it was hard to see. But in a city, there was enough light, and this was a particular statue that's a pilgrim statue, and the person is lying back against the pillar there with his eyes closed. This is O Sombrero, which is like a little hobbit kind of places. It was lovely. It was up in the mountains. It was beautiful that day. It would have been a fun place to stay, but I was just kind of three hours or so into my walk that day. Beautiful sunsets and sunrises. On the lower right-hand side there, that's a abandoned or ruins of an old monastery. And I understand there was an albergue there. It did not have running water. It did not have electricity, but apparently it had 6 beds. I didn't stay there. But I'm sure that would have been an interesting experience. So you won't hear this information in your average travel talk, but I spent way too much time thinking and fretting about where am I going to go to the bathroom and when and how. And anyway, this is probably too much information. I'm one of those people who has trouble going to the bathroom when somebody's in a stall next to me, let alone if it's a man in a stall next to me. Fortunately, that didn't happen very often. But part of the problem with that on the Camino is that there are no porta potties anywhere along the way. So unfortunately, people are using the side of the road or woods if there is, and they're leaving toilet paper behind, which is really unfortunate. So, they really encourage people to have your little baggies and pack it out and that kind of thing. But nevertheless, it's a challenge. That's why I also, every 3 to 4 miles, like to stop at a bar or cafe so I could use the bathroom there, too. My expenses, just to give you an idea, the albergues range anywhere from give us a donation up to, I think the most I paid was $15 for, a dormitory type room, $25 to $40 for a private room, and then $175 for that stupid room in Pamplona. But anyway, that's pretty much what I paid for my rooms. Breakfast, sometimes they were just a donation along the side of the road, or even at the albergue, they'd ask for a donation. Or if I stopped, it might be $4 or $5. Lunch ranged 5 to 7. Pilgrim's meal, like I mentioned, I think I got 1 or 2 for 10, up to 15. Beer and wine were inexpensive. They had really good sangria with all kinds of fruit in it. Anyway, they were like $1 to $3 each. And then, of course, laundry. So my budget was about $40 to $50 a day, for each of those 40 days that I walked. Buen Camino is what everybody says to one another along the Camino. Have a good way, good walk. And whether, you're passing another pilgrim, or whether it's somebody living in a town, an old person out sweeping their front step, they will wish you a Buen Camino. The cruise to Faro is also a very famous spot along the way, and this is along the Camino, and this is also in the movie The Way. And it's a very spiritual spot where people carry a stone or a memento or a prayer or something, a picture from home, and then leave it here. So you can see that there's all those rocks piled up there, and there were a lot of little mementos in there. And the point of it is to lay down your burdens. The day that I was there was a woman who was with me, and so she took my picture. It was threatening rain that day, but it didn't rain. And then she went on, and so I got to spend quite a bit of time by myself, which is good, because it really was very emotional to be there. And so that's my stone, my Lake Superior stone, and then there I am putting it down there, and then I chose Matthew 11, 28 to 30. And that is, "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find your rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden light." So there's my stone in the pile there. St. James you see him everywhere. And I kind of looked for the St. James statues there in all the churches and other places, just kind of commemorating St. James. And you could identify him because he had a staff in one hand with gourds hanging, which would be for liquids. And then in the other hand, he had a book, which I'm assuming is a Bible. And then he usually had a shell on him somewhere. It might have been on his hat, or it might have been on his chest. And then sometimes he had a dog with him. There also were many other memorials honoring other pilgrims. You don't know, I came to learn, I don't think somebody died right at that spot, but they wanted to put up something to remember somebody who had passed away. And so there, on the left there's some shoes hanging from that one. There probably was somebody's name. In the center there was a whole group of trees that had all kinds of ribbons hanging from them, and the ribbons had names and pictures remembering people. On the right was a memorial, and it was put there by a young man's group of friends. And the young man had died at the age of 19, but he had walked the Camino when he was 16. And what it said on there was, let's see if I can remember that, "A boat anchored in the harbor is safe, but that's not what boats are made for." And then there were a lot of murals, kind of honoring pilgrims. There were shoes and shells and words of wisdom along the way. There was, like, where those benches are, that was a cross there that you could just sit and rest and reflect. There were little piles of stones that also had little mementos and rocks in them, and maybe somebody's name attached to it. Maybe there might be a Madonna statue on the top of some of them. But this is everywhere along there. And then, the crosses in the fence. And so, and this went on for blocks and blocks, this fence did, and they were filled with these stick crosses where people had taken sticks and woven them in the fence. And on the right was also a statue honoring pilgrims. The pilgrim has their backpack there. It's a man and a woman. You'd see a lot of these. That on the left there, it kind of caught you like, that's kind of weird, but it was a flat black metal statue there honoring pilgrims. On the right, that was a 3D statue, and that pilgrim, he's having something to drink, and then he's got the shell on his hat. But like I said, they're everywhere. I have a ton of pictures of those kinds of things. The churches, I really tried to stop and take a peek in all the churches that I attended or that I walked by. In smaller villages, they were locked, but in the larger ones, they were usually open, and even in small villages, some of them were absolutely magnificent in, the gold plating and the altar there. Of course, all Catholic cathedrals. I did attend a couple of masses along the way in Spanish. The one thing in the center there, those are old Pope robes, or not Pope, old robes that priests and cardinals would have worn that they were preserving, and very intricate, made with gold thread by the poor people in the village, I'm sure. But anyway, they're Jesus statues. One thing that really struck me is just how graphic they were. And I didn't take a lot of pictures of them, but some of them were much more graphic than this, where Jesus has blood running down his face. He's very bruised up, where he would have been dragging his cross. In America, our crucifixes are rather sanitized compared to that. I mean, some of these, you just couldn't look away. It was very moving. This is the cathedral in Burgos, which is very famous, and that's the inside when you walk in there. And many of these churches were built or started to be built in the 12th, 13th, 14th century, but they were remodeled and the gold was added later. And as somebody kind of said next to me, the gold that was pilfered from the Americas. So probably after 1492 is when, the gold came back from South America and was added to their sanctuaries. My favorite places were the tiny little chapels, and this was one. This lady, she might be a sister, I'm not sure. But anyway, she was in this little chapel, and she gave a blessing to every pilgrim who came in, said a blessing for you, and of course she stamped our passports, and she gave us a little medallion thing. And on the left there, the churches have storks make those nests on top of the church steeples. And again, there's just another, gold. On the left, that was an abandoned church, and I came around the corner, and there was a woman sitting there playing the recorder. And, again, so magical. And on the right, that was a church at night, and with a little square out in front. Those, they just went on and on. I have zillions of pictures of churches, too. This is the cathedral in Leon, which is known for their stained glass. And it's funny, you don't see it in the picture from the outside, but in the inside there were just, the stained glass went on and on and on and on. And a really special time was, we stayed in a village called Robinall, and there's a Benedictine monastery. Benedictine monastery, is that where the monks live, in monasteries? Okay, they chant Vespers in Spanish every night. So that was in that church on the left. And it was just a very, the plaster was coming down. It was a very primitive building, but it was just very special. The center, there was a man praying in the center. And even on the right there, the prayer candles were lined up in an arrow because that's such an iconic symbol. And this is, Raylene and I, at the Cathedral of Santiago. We have made it. And part of the thing that everybody wants to see when they get to Santiago is the Bota Fumera, which is the swinging incense. And They don't do it, they will swing it on holy days, of which there's like 9 a year or something. And then if somebody pays the church, I think it's $500, then they'll do it then. So I think tour groups or whatever. And you don't know ahead of time whether or not they're going to be doing it unless it happens to be a holy day. Anyway, I told Raylene, I am going to sit through every Mass until I see this. And they would have Mass 4 times a day, and I sat through 3 of them, and then I saw it. And so on this next slide, we'll see if it'll play. Does it play? If not, that's okay. It's 65 pounds. The incense burner is. Oh, there we go. Thank you, Teresa. And there is somebody singing. And so you have the smell of it, and the sight, and the singing. It takes 8 priests to make that swing. So that I plucked that off of YouTube just to give you kind of an idea. So in the crypt, or the basement of the Cathedral of Santiago, is where the remains of St. James is. And on the left, that silver casket is supposedly the remains of St. James. And then many people, as part of their pilgrimage, will spend another 4 days walking to the coast, which was prior to discovering the Americas by the Spanish and the Portuguese, that this was considered to be the end of the world, the coast on Spain. There wasn't any more except the water. And so many pilgrims will walk over there. We took a bus. and this is Muxia, and we spent one night there, and that was very nice to be just kind of relaxing and walking in the water. Overlooking the city of Muxia, that cross there is where some people will take their boots and burn them, or their clothes. They really discourage that because it makes a mess. But that's kind of what, historically, what people did when they got to that point. And Muxia, I think it was Muxia that had, is that where there was the sea glass beach? Yes. Yeah. And so, unfortunately, the tide was in, so we couldn't gather sea glass. But apparently, lots of sea glass washes up. But there, my feet deserved, after 500 miles, I'm soaking my feet in the water there. I have about a 5-minute video. Does anyone care if I play it? Okay. Altrea is also a Camino word, which means go forward with courage. Onward. This is from a blog that I follow. It's called Nadine Walks, and she put this together, and it so captures the spirit of the Camino that I wanted to play it. Doesn't play? While she's setting that up.
Whoa, that is cold. It's crazy.
That's not it.
Captures the spirit.
I want to cut that, Teresa. We don't know where this is going. So while Teresa's getting that teed up here, what questions do you have for me? So, fortunately, there was usually, this is it. Fortunately, there was usually somebody who spoke English and Spanish. Otherwise, I learned a few phrases, but the problem is if I would say a phrase in Spanish, they would reply in Spanish, and I only knew how to say the phrase. I didn't know how to answer. But I did use Google Translate a couple of times. But, yeah.
This is the Camino. The Camino is a walk across Spain, or maybe across France or Portugal. It's a walk across time, a pilgrimage to Santiago. It's a walk that lasts a week or a month or 2 months, a walk that begins in Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port, or Irún, or León, or Porto, or maybe from your doorstep, wherever that may be. Maybe it's a walk that starts in your soul. It's that first tentative step. It's placing one foot in front of the other and beginning and trusting that the yellow arrows will lead you to where you need to be. It's a backpack and a pair of shoes that start a size too large, but somehow your feet grow into them. It's a walking stick tight in your hand, a buff around your neck, a hat that threatens to blow off in the wind. It's the same 2 outfits day after day, the unexpected relief of not having to think about what to wear, of not having to care about what to wear. It's hand washing your laundry in a sink, rinsing and rinsing the socks, but the water never quite runs clear. A quick dry towel that you pat over your body after the shower with the button you press for the water that comes out in 7-second bursts. It's the albergues, with the bunk bed squeezed into the room, friends and strangers sprawled on the thin mattresses. It's hoping for a bottom bunk. It's hoping for a top bunk. It's hoping that the pilgrim who snores has chosen another albergue in town. It's the small pension rooms, too, the luxury of a space that is all your own. 25 euros with a sink in the corner and a window that looks down onto the busy square below. It's the routine of it all, the waking and the rising, the walking and the resting, the chores and the meals and going to bed to repeat it all the next day. It's the walking. Walking over the mountains, through the vineyards, across the plains, into the forests, on paths of dirt and stone, mud and grass and hard, hard pavement. Through the countryside and into the cities, over bridges and through tunnels and along a canal or a river or a stream or the sea, up and down and up and down. And sometimes on a flat path that stretches to the horizon, a path that never seems to end. It's the strain in your calves and the burning of your thighs, the rubbing of a toe and the start of a blister, the pain in your heels and the ache of your shoulders and the sun that burns against the back of your neck. The sun, the relentless sun. And the rain and the wind and the thick air and the clouds and the cold mornings, the sweaty nights, the afternoons that feel just perfect. It's dogs that strain at their chains, the cats that dart from the shadows, the fields of cows and the horses that approach with curiosity, flocks of sheep and sometimes even a wild boar, pigeons in the morning, a howling in the night, flies that buzz in your ears. It's that first stop for a café con leche in a sturdy mug with a thin biscuit on the side. It's a thick slice of tortilla and a hunk of crusty bread. It's tostada con tomate or a flaky croissant. It's first breakfast, it's second breakfast. It's an open bar just when you need one. It's a closed bar when you are counting on coffee. A cerveza at the end of the walking day, one and then another. It's the ability to keep going when you're tired, when you think that you can't walk another step. Sometimes it's calling a taxi, or hopping on a bus, or letting someone else carry your pack. It's telling yourself that the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. It's continuing to place one foot in front of the other. It's doing it alone. It's the stretch of the path and nothing ahead and nothing behind, just your long shadows stretching in the morning sun. And it's the people. It's your Camino family, your friends, soulmates you've only known for 5 minutes. The questions, where did you come from? Where are you going? How are your feet? It's the community of pilgrims that run in a long line across all of Spain, pilgrims from around the world, and you are part of it. You learn a few words in a dozen different languages as you walk with friends from Spain and France and Germany and South Korea and Australia and Hungary and the Czech Republic and Ireland and Italy, Japan, Brazil, and the Netherlands. Friends from California and Minnesota and Florida, and sometimes even a friend from your own town. It's sharing a meal with these friends, everyone pulling a chair up to the table, room for another and another. It's a bottle of red wine and a basket of bread, a large pot of soup and squares of dark chocolate. It's losing your friends and finding your friends and saying goodbye and saying hello. It's reunions at the most unexpected moments. It's serendipity. It's communal magic. It's hard, it's easy. You feel lost, you feel found. You don't know where you're going or what you're doing, and you are exactly where you need to be. It's a chapel at the top of a hill, a church of stained glass, a cathedral with towers that shine like beacons. It's the long walk, the hope and the faith that you will be able to continue on this path, one foot in front of the other, on and on to the end, to the very end, past the end. The Camino begins when the walking ends. The Camino never ends. This is the Camino.
Who wants to go? Any other questions? Jeannie? The Minnesota girls, and mainly it's been through Facebook. There's a woman from the Netherlands, and then a couple women from Washington State, and then Arizona. Yeah.
Talked about that roadside stand is there a season? I mean, do they hike it all year round?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
People do hike it all year round.
The whole length? The whole-
Yes. However, the Pyrenees does close, and they don't want you walking over the Pyrenees because storms brew up and people have to get rescued. But otherwise, people do hike it year-round. And the thing is, many of the albergues close, the private ones, because the people then, like one of them that I stayed at was owned by a woman from Australia. And so then she went back to Australia over the winter, and so she closed her albergue. But you can walk it year-round. Yes?
So when you paid for these various lodging and meals and food trucks and cafes, did you have to have euros or do they take credit cards or is it a mixture?
We were told to have euros. And so I had a dedicated account, and they have ATM machines along the way. So every few days I would just take some money out of an ATM. But when I was actually there, I saw credit cards being used more than I expected. But I primarily used cash because it kind of saved the place money too. They didn't have to pay the fees. Yeah. Yes.
Is it mostly women on this trail? It seems like it's predominantly heavy, men rather than women. I just wondered, what was your take on that?
I tend to hang out with women more than men, so it's probably my pictures kind of are skewed. I think the statistics are it's pretty much 50-50. Now my observation, a snapshot in time when I was walking, was that it seemed like of the people walking solo, there tend to be more of those as women than men walking solo. But that was just when I was there was my observation. But I think it's about 50-50, men and women. You saw a couple children, but not very many. Yes, Ani.
The average,
So I started in September and finished the end of October. And so at that time of year, you're not going to have college students. Like teachers and college students will go over the summer. And then, so in that time of year, it seemed to be a lot of young adults that had gotten out of college and were just, traveling around, doing whatever. So there was a lot of those groups a lot of those people in their 20s. And then there was a bunch of people 55 and up who were retired at that particular time of year. Yeah. I was going to say something else about that, but I can't remember. Yeah. That's a really good question. She asked if I would do the same route again. I loved this route, and Raylene and I ran into this couple. They were an older couple. They were probably in their 70s. They were just finishing their 8th Camino, and they did the same route. And so there's a part of me that says, I loved it so much, I'd like to do it again. But there's another part of me that says, Oh, but I just met the coolest people and had the coolest experience. It could never be as good the second time, which isn't true, I'm sure. But anyway, I definitely want to do another Camino and thinking maybe the Portuguese. Yeah, it's a little shorter. And yeah, I think it's like 200. I wouldn't start in Lisbon, I'd start in Porto. Because apparently from Lisbon to Porto is a lot of industrial, not that great. But starting in Porto up to Santiago, I think is 200 some miles. Yes. Oh, so I've had a knee replacement, and so I was a little concerned about that, but my artificial knee did great. My other knee did great. Obviously, I had aches and pains. My hips bothered me more than I expected they would, and I'm sure it's the weight of the pack and walking uphill and downhill, and just, I think that was really hard on my knees. I walked in Hoka's, which are a running type of shoe, and I bought them a size bigger, and that's really important because your feet really do swell. But I got a couple blisters the second week in, interestingly. I didn't get them right off the bat, but I got some blisters on my second toe, kind of on the edges. The toes were rubbing together. I wore merino wool socks. I had some sock liners. That really helped. But I would say by about the third week, I feel like I had kind of trail hardened up where it wasn't as bad then. But yeah, aches and pains, my lower back hurts sometimes. Oh, I started in earnest training about 4 to 6 months before, yeah, where I really tried to get that 25 to 30 miles a week in of walking and the hills and trails. And I think that was plenty. Oh, yeah, that's a good question. She asked about the climate or the weather. So the first 4 weeks, I think I only had 2 days of rain. Otherwise, it was sunny, it was warm. I'd get up in the morning, take off, had my gloves on and kind of my buff because it was cool in the mornings. But by 10 o'clock, had my sun hat on, was down to shirt sleeves and things. And it probably, everything's in Celsius, but I think it got up into the 70s or so. But then the last 2 weeks, and that was partly, I think, bad luck, but partly just the region of Spain, that western side of Spain, closer to the ocean, tended to have more rain. It's very lush and rainy over there, and so it rained every day, I think, all or part of a day. And I don't think we ever had an all-day rain, but a most-day rain to a part day, and it was windy. Yeah, there were some miserable days there. Ani.
When you're alone, what runs through your
So she asked what goes through my mind when I'm alone. So, I tried to do my prayer time in the morning because I'm easily distracted. I have a hard time keeping focus on what I'm doing. So I'll see something and then my mind will go off. Otherwise, if I'm walking with somebody, then I'm talking. But I don't know. What goes through my mind? I don't know. Kind of things I've done in my life and things I wish I could do over, plans for retirement or, kind of the usual stuff. Yeah. Yeah, she asked about Camino etiquette. So they really tell you, take out your toilet paper, leave nothing behind. They made a big point. Unfortunately, doesn't appear to be well heated. When something is a donation, a donativo, that doesn't mean free. And so what they ask is that you give what you can, what you feel it's worth. And so if you're having a meal that you paid $12 for last night, and this was equal, you would want to put $12 in the bucket. Yeah, those are the two that I remember. Oh. So, darn it, I forgot to put that picture in there too. So, because I am Swedish and am very interested in my Swedish genealogy and family, there weren't a lot of pilgrims from Sweden, but when I met one, I wanted to connect with them. And so I happened to hook up with a man from Sweden, his name was Thomas, and then there was a woman from Italy, and she was a physician who just had some time off. And so we were talking politics, and Sweden had a new government, and Italy had a new government, and so we were talking about that. Anyway, the woman, when I told Thomas that this is where my family is from in Sweden, and he was from the next municipality over. He was from very close, and the woman from Italy commented that we looked alike and we talked alike, which I thought was interesting. And then there was a woman I met from Sweden, and she was in her 70s. She was a retired social worker, and I walked with her part of several days. Anyway, I happened to snap a picture of the two of us. I wish I would have included it. And it was amazing how much we looked alike. Yeah, it was like she was my long-lost Swedish sister.
Roxanne mentioned, tell some stories about
Yeah.
we talked about.
So, of course, there was that woman that piled us in her car. There was a man who, I was walking along. I didn't have any food. I didn't have any water. I was out, and there were water fountains along the way, but I just happened to be out at that particular time, and I was hungry. And I rounded a corner, and lo and behold, here's this little man standing there in his T-shirt and jeans, and he has a cooler there with ice and drinks. And then he has a bunch of fruit there. And, it was like this Camino angel who appeared. And that happened a lot, where people would just kind of appear. Somebody, I checked you into an albergue, and somebody looked at me and immediately lifted my pack off my back and said, "Sit down, you don't need to check in right now." So people were just very caring for one another.
Picture, I remember on Facebook that had the
Didn't I put that on here?
I was just curious on what the story
Was it in there?
Yes.
And I skipped by it. So in the first, 7th day, so it's the first week of the Camino, there is a spot. It's a winery run by, I think, some monks or something. Anyway, it's they have out by the Camino path these spigots that come out that have wine in them. And you just pull the spigot and stick your water bottle or your shell or whatever you have to drink wine. Yeah, that's kind of their deal there. It was red wine, and they make that, and I'm sure they hope that people might come in, but pilgrims don't buy anything because we have to carry it. And so there really isn't a lot of shopping, or because you really can't carry stuff. And so they offered this free wine there, and it was a big draw. Everybody stopped there. Yeah.
Talk about the two methods of packing and carrying.
Oh, okay. You mean transporting versus... So there were people who had huge luggage. Big backpacks, big duffel bags, big suitcases. Obviously, you can't carry this. There's transport from place to place. And so for $5, you can put a little tag, and this is where I want my bag to be dropped off tonight. Of course, you have to know where you're going to be that night. You have to have made a reservation or hope that there's a bed there. But they'll come and pick it up, and when you get there, there's your luggage right there. And a lot of people do that, and I was told, don't carry your backpack. Just take a little day pack and send your pack. But I was kind of stubborn. I wanted to carry my pack, and I did carry it every day except for one. I did transport it. And I have to say it was nice walking without that. I just had a very light backpack. But, so your choice, and there were people who were going to do more traveling, like people from China or South Korea, they were going to do more traveling, so they had all this luggage with them, and so obviously they had it transferred. So for $5, their big suitcase went, and you know, they had all kinds of luggage. But those are the two ways, is that you buy, thanks, have a good day. That either you would carry your pack or you would have it transported. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, everything you need is, it's amazing how everything you need fits in here. You really need so little in the world.
I returned and then got together with some friends to talk about my experience on the Camino. My pack weighed about 13 pounds. And someone asked me, well, how did you then connect or pick up with the rest of your luggage?
That was
There
it.
was no other luggage. And then I started talking about one about brought two of this and one of that.
Yeah, you just wash it out every night. Wear the same thing. You don't have to worry about what am I going to wear tomorrow. Wear the same thing every day. Yep. Anything else? I kept you a little long. She's asking about reservations, and so my kind of the spirit of the Camino is, oh, you just walk, and when you feel like stopping, a place will appear, and well, it wasn't quite that simple. And when I made reservations for the first couple of nights because everybody's kind of going at once here. But when I had that experience in Pamplona where there was no place to stay, and fortunately I had the resources and somebody with me who spoke Spanish who helped me make a hotel reservation, I just thought I'm gonna book ahead a little bit here because I don't want to be sleeping outside or whatever. So I would go to booking.com, and some of the albergues are on there, but not all of them. I got a list from the Pilgrim office when I started of all the albergues in each little village with a phone number. Sometimes somebody would pick up the phone, sometimes they wouldn't. I never quite knew, did they understand, you know, that I was trying to book a room for the next night, or... But anyway, so I did both, and so then I booked ahead for a while, and then I got relaxed a little bit and say, oh, okay, well, you know, I think people are spread out enough, I can, you know, just show up, and then I had that experience on the Meseta where it was booked, and so then I got gun shy again and started making reservations. Yeah. Self-service was excellent. Always. And almost every place had Wi-Fi. Yeah.
And you were only making the reservation one night.
Usually one night ahead. Mm-hmm.
So you use US telephone number and then there's a roaming charging?
I got an international plan that allowed me to, yeah. And I tried not to use GPS because that burned through that data really quickly. But sometimes when I got to a city and I had the name of where I was staying, but I had no idea where it was, I would put my GPS on then. But otherwise, I tried not to do that.
How did you prepare for accidents along the way? Like, what if you sprained your ankle or whatever? What would you do?
There would have been somebody. And there is across Europe, we have like a 911 system. They have a 211 or 112 or something. And so if something were to happen, somebody would come up, or I could have called that emergency number, told them where I was, and then emergency people would pick you up and they would take you to the hospital. And there were some people who did. There was a woman who was showing somebody how to use walking sticks, a woman from Netherlands, and the person got their walking stick stuck between her legs, and she tripped and she broke her arm. And so she went in and they x-rayed it and they gave her, you know, a sling thing. She walked the rest of the community. She was with her husband. And so they obviously had to get private rooms because she needed help dressing and showering and stuff. But she walked the rest of the way, and they sent her pack on ahead. But, you know, the medical care is really pretty good over there. It's much less expensive here. And I did get travel insurance, so I had that just in case. But, yeah, you just kind of rely on somebody helping you out. And I was never concerned that somebody wouldn't help out. Matt? Yeah, so I did see a number of people bike it, and some of those pathways, they had to get off and push their bike up because it was just too steep. But there were places along the Camino where there was a sign that said bikers this way and walkers that way, and so they would get routed onto roads in places that were just absolutely not bikeable. And then some people would rent bikes in Burgos, and they would bike the Meseta, which kind of makes sense because it's flat and, you know, especially if you wanted to make up some time, you know, that was a good section of it to just bike, you know, and cover it faster. Thanks, Mary. Mary and I went to college together. Yeah, I'm so glad you came. Anything else? Thank you.